The air in the seismic research lab was thick, almost tangible, with the sterile scent of ozone and a lingering perfume of forgotten coffee cups. Dr. Aris Thorne, a man whose face told stories of sleepless nights, relentless research, and moments of sudden insight, stared intently at the data screaming across the display. For 6 long months, the San Andreas Fault Monitoring System had been recording something unusual, something rhythmic, almost intentional beneath the Mojave Desert. It was not the grinding or slipping of tectonic plates that geophysicists expected. It was a pattern, a pulse that suggested consciousness, or at least purpose. He gestured to Dr. Lin Chen, a young geophysicist known for her analytical mind and skeptical eye. "Run the 3D tomography again, Lin," he said, his voice hoarse. "Focus on the 3-kilometer depth plane directly beneath the Mojave." Her fingers danced over the keyboard, executing commands with precision. As the holographic scan completed, both scientists froze. The display revealed a vast network of structures, impossibly symmetrical and geometric, stretching beneath the desert floor. They were not natural rock formations. Interlocking pyramids perfectly aligned to a celestial point that had not been visible from this latitude in 80,000 years, sprawled in 3 dimensions beneath them. Neither Egyptian nor Mesoamerican architecture could explain what they saw. The image was alien, monumental, and deeply unsettling. Compelled to investigate further, Aris and Lin followed a faint electromagnetic fluctuation that pointed to an abandoned, dilapidated mine shaft 40 miles north of Barstow. Dust swirled in the wind as they approached, and the old timber groaned like a whisper of the past. With precise drilling and careful excavation, they breached the last layer of hardened, unknown composite material. The air that rushed out was cool and fresh, tinged with ozone and a hint of petrichor, unlike any air they had breathed in the lab. It was breathable, inviting them into the unknown. Descending into the shaft, headlamps piercing the primordial darkness, they entered a colossal cavern. Walls of polished black stone gleamed even in their weak light, engraved with repeating spirals and concentric circles that seemed to defy modern mathematics. Gigantic, tiered platforms extended into the shadows above. Crystalline pillars hummed faintly with dormant energy, and a delicate, iridescent moss carpeted certain surfaces. There were no homes, no fires, no tools, nothing to suggest habitation by flesh and blood beings. Yet the scale was architectural, deliberate, and purposeful. They had discovered what they would later call the Arcanum, a subterranean city beyond human comprehension, silent, immense, and enigmatic. At the heart of the Arcanum, the passage led to a hemispherical chamber, smooth and perfect, which they named the Chamber of Reflections. In its center stood a tripod holding a single glowing orb, the echosphere. When Aris hesitantly touched it, a torrent of information flooded his mind, not in words or images, but as pure abstract resonance. Memories of a civilization emerged, beings of immense height, spectral in appearance, who perceived the world not as matter, but as interwoven energy fields and harmonic vibrations. These were the Tellurians, a post-organic species that had transcended flesh and bone, shaping the materials of their environment at the molecular level with thought alone. They had built the Arcanum to survive the Shroud, a cosmic phenomenon that swept across galaxies, destabilizing matter and eroding consciousness. Anchored deep within the Earth's crust, drawing energy from the planet's magnetic core, the Arcanum was both sanctuary and engine. Yet, as Aris absorbed these echoes, he saw the civilization fracture. A faction of Tellurians, believing in planetary stewardship, had opposed the primary faction's purely survivalist anchoring strategy. The conflict disrupted the anchoring process, causing violent geological upheavals, volcanic activity, crustal fracturing, magnetic anomalies. The Tellurians themselves were scattered, their consciousnesses dissolving into the very magnetic field they had sought to harness. The rhythmic echoes the scientist had first detected were the dispersed consciousness of these beings, now intertwined with the Earth itself. Aris and Lin realized the magnitude of their discovery. The Arcanum was not merely a ruin, it was a repository of advanced knowledge, a complex system of energy manipulation, and a moral archive left by a civilization that had confronted the limits of power and choice. Their every movement, every thought, had been encoded into the structure. Yet this knowledge was dangerous. The United States military soon arrived, led by General Marcus Cole, eager to weaponize the Earth's core as a limitless energy source. Aris and Lin were confined to a small observation station, while Cole's engineers attempted to override the safety mechanisms of the Arcanum. The ancient warning became increasingly clear. Misuse of this power could draw the shroud to Earth, bringing catastrophic consequences on a cosmic scale. The stakes were higher than humanity could comprehend, and the silent city beneath the Mojave held the key to both salvation and ruin.
As General Cole's engineers prepared to activate the core anchor, Aris and Lin understood they had mere moments to intervene. Lin rushed to a panel etched with Tellurian spirals, identifying a resonant frequency modulator connected to the echosphere. Acting on instinct, she activated it. A sound emerged, pure resonance, neither music nor alarm, but the collective echo of grief, warning, and consciousness from the scattered Tellurians. The entire Arcanum vibrated with power, conduits glowing, crystalline pillars humming violently. Outside, military personnel were thrown back by the overwhelming force, their instruments buckling under the magnetic backlash. The echosphere pulsed with energy, violet, then white, then blinding blue as the city's systems responded to the amplified Tellurian consciousness. The core anchor failed to activate, protecting the planet from a potential tear in reality itself. General Cole was thrown across the chamber, but survived, stunned into silence. The Arcanum remained intact, its silent halls now a testament to the brilliance and the restraint of a civilization that had transcended the limits of flesh and ambition. Aris and Lin climbed the exit shaft to the surface, carrying the weight of knowledge, responsibility, and awe. Humanity had been offered a choice through the legacy of the Tellurians. Ultimate power comes with consequences, and wisdom is as vital as strength. The Mojave sun set in deep crimson and gold above the desert, while the Arcanum lay beneath, silent, vigilant, and eternal. The whispers of the Tellurians lingered in the magnetic field of the Earth, a warning, a memory, and a promise that some truths are not to be wielded recklessly. They had glimpsed the shroud, understood its threat, and survived to carry the lesson forward, leaving the Arcanum as a sentinel for the future, a monument of brilliance and restraint.
Part 1. The Whispers of a Sunken Age. The academic consensus was a neatly bound volume. The Americas before 1492 were a wilderness awaiting European enlightenment, a land of disparate tribes, save for the spectacular yet ultimately conquered Incas and Aztecs. Dr. Elias Vance, however, lived in the margin notes of that volume. For 20 years he had chased the whispers, not of the Maya, whose ruins kissed the humid sky, nor the Andean Incas, whose stones defied gravity, but of the shadow civilizations. Those whose zenith predated the Olmec's rise, whose languages were ghosts, and whose influence was a subtle, persistent current under the mainstream of Mesoamerican and Andean history. Elias was a disgraced archaeologist, stripped of his tenure, not for fraud, but for heresy. His heresy was the belief in Corral Supe, the oldest known civilization in the Americas, flourishing 5 millennia ago in what is now Peru, simultaneous with the pyramid builders of Egypt. But even Corral for Elias was merely a ripple. He sought the source. His quest led him to a forgotten corner of the Amazonian basin, a region locals called O Corazao Esquecido, the Forgotten Heart. Accompanying him was Lena Petrova, a brilliant linguistic specializing in dead and uncatalogued Amazonian languages, and Mateo, a taciturn local guide whose ancestry, he claimed, stretched back to a time before the jungle was a jungle. They say the great river was a sea once, and beneath that sea the first stones, Mateo muttered, one humid evening tending a sparse fire. Lena adjusted her glasses, swatting a mosquito. The geological data supports the theory of vast cyclical flooding in the lower basin. But a major civilization in the Amazon? The soil is too poor, the climate too volatile for the kind of monumental architecture you seek, Elias. Architecture isn't just stone, Lena. It's organization, astronomy, metallurgy, things history insists were only introduced later, Elias countered, tapping a map marked with coordinates near a tributary of the Rio Negro. I'm not looking for another Tenochtitlan. I'm looking for Aztlan's mythical precursor, or the Tawantinsuyu's original blueprint. His current obsession was the Marajoara culture of Marajo Island, a society of sophisticated potters who built extensive mound complexes near the mouth of the Amazon between 800 and 1400 CE. Their geometric, often abstract art was unsettlingly advanced, and their earthworks were monumental, yet history dismissed them as an isolated anomaly. Elias believed the Marajoara were the remnants, the shadow of something greater. The latest satellite scans show a pattern in the Terra Preta, Elias continued, referring to the incredibly rich dark earth found in pockets of the Amazon, created artificially by ancient peoples. The distribution isn't random, it's a deliberate grid, almost astronomical. It suggests a population density and agricultural sophistication that official history cannot account for. And what does the grid align with, Elias? Lena asked, intrigued despite herself. Elias pointed to a constellation only visible at certain times of the year in the southern hemisphere. Argo Navis, the ship that sailed the mythical seas, now fragmented into smaller constellations. An asterism tied to navigation, to great voyages, to a people who understood celestial mechanics on a scale that shouldn't be possible for pre-contact peoples.
The next day, they ventured deep into the grid's epicenter. The oppressive jungle, thick and green, seemed to swallow their light. After days of hacking through the undergrowth, Mateo stopped dead, his machete dropping. "Look," he whispered, pointing past the wall of vines. There, where the jungle canopy thinned, lay not ruins, but a sophisticated system of geoglyphs carved into the earth, too vast to be seen from the ground. Unlike the Nazca lines, these were not figures, but geometric, concentric circles, precise angles, and long, perfectly straight causeways, all connected by a network of engineered canals. A blueprint of a vast vanished city. Elias sank to his knees, running his hands over a piece of remarkably cut, dark rock. It wasn't granite or sandstone. It was an obsidian-like material, impossibly polished. This is not Marajoara. This is not even Olmec. The sheer scale. The earthworks cover hundreds of square miles. It's an entire region, a kingdom, engineered. Lena, meanwhile, had found an intact, though partially buried, stone skele. It bore a dense, compact form of writing, unlike any hieroglyphic system she knew. It was neither Maya nor Zapotec. "The motifs are serpent-like," she breathed, tracing a glyph. "But the structure,
It's a syllabary, highly abstract. Look at this repeating marker. It's a phonetic anchor. It speaks of water, of the great flood, and of the serpent riders. The serpent riders, the Kukulchan, or feathered serpent people, were a myth even to the Maya. Lore suggested they were the first great architects, the ones who taught the Olmec the secrets of celestial alignment and the calendar. But there was no archaeological evidence. Until now. As they began clearing the area around the stele, they uncovered a small, perfectly preserved structure. Inside, the air was dry and still, preserved by the volcanic rock used in its construction. In the center, resting on a pedestal, was a device. It was a bowl-shaped receptacle of polished jade, intricately carved, but its function was clearly astronomical. A series of tiny, perfectly spherical stones, hematite and obsidian, were set in grooves that corresponded to the movement of stars, specifically the Argo Novis constellation. "It's a celestial clock," Elias breathed, his voice hoarse with awe. "It tracks the precession of the equinoxes. This knowledge, it requires thousands of years of continuous, precise observation. It redates our understanding of American astronomy by millennia." The crucial challenge to official history was not just the clock's existence, but the mathematics of its inscription. Lena's preliminary analysis of the accompanying inscriptions showed a profound understanding of zero as a placeholder, but also as a concept of nothingness that predated the Mayan zero and the Gupta zero of India. "They didn't just calculate time, Elias," Lena said, her eyes shining. "They calculated deep time. The inscriptions speak of a calendar cycle that spans over 26,000 years. They saw their civilization not as a new beginning, but as a single link in a vast chain. And the end of their cycle was marked by a cataclysmic event, a massive flood, a cleansing of the earth."
Part 3 and 4. The Collapse and the Legacy. The Sons of the Shadow. Over the next 2 weeks, using ground-penetrating radar, Elias confirmed his theory. Beneath the geoglyphs were the foundations of monumental structures, cities built of baked clay and volcanic stone, connected by the massive, straight causeways. Engineering feats requiring a centralized state on the scale of Sumeria or Egypt. The serpent riders, the Kukulchu, were not myths. They were the architects of the first American civilization, their golden age fading into the pre-classical period of the official timeline. But why did they vanish, leaving no monumental stone pyramids for the conquistadors to find? The answer lies in the structural design of their main ceremonial center, now a vast, perfectly symmetrical mound. Unlike the Maya or Aztecs, the Kukulchu built structures designed for deconstruction. The stone foundations were capped with earth and vegetation, and their above-ground buildings were primarily of wood and compressed clay. It was a conscious decision, an environmental adaptation to the volatile basin, or perhaps something more philosophical. One evening, by the light of a flickering oil lamp, Lena managed to translate a key passage from the stele. "When the serpent in the sky swallows the great ship, the waters will rise. The stone cities endure only in the memory of the mountain. The Kukulchu shall become the shadow beneath the water. We leave the knowledge, not the monument, for the monument draws the eye of the destroyer. But the knowledge shall hide in the soil and the stars, waiting for the sons of the shadow to remember." The message was clear. They foresaw a collapse, perhaps a cyclical flood event tied to their grand calendar cycle, and they deliberately chose to demonumentalize their civilization. They literally became the shadow civilizations, their cities decaying into the earth, their knowledge scattered into oral traditions, myth, and the very ground of the Amazon, manifesting as terra preta and geoglyphs.
This act of conscious erasure explained the mysteries that challenge official history. The Olmec's sudden appearance. They inherited the calendar, the mathematics, and the worship of the feathered serpent, Quetzalcoatl or Kukulkan, from the Kukulchu survivors who fled the basin for the Gulf Coast lowlands, bringing with them a ready-made advanced culture. The Andean connection. The serpent riders' knowledge of astronomical navigation hinted at long-distance travel, linking the Amazonian basin to the coastal cultures of Peru. The Corral Supe, in their isolation, were perhaps a colony or a sister state, focused on textiles and trade, preserving a different facet of the original knowledge. The absence of the wheel and metal tools initially. The Kukulchu chose not to emphasize technologies that led to large-scale warfare and environmental exploitation, focusing instead on sustainable agriculture, terra preta, astronomy, and mathematics. Their legacy was intellectual, not industrial. Now, Part 4. The Sons of the Shadow. Their final discovery was the most profound. Beneath the ceremonial platform, sealed in a small, dry vault, they found a collection of woven, cotton-based quipu. Not the knot-based record-keeping system of the later Incas, but an older, more complex version. Lena realized it was not just a census or a tally, it was a form of binary, tactile writing. Using the astronomical data from the jade clock as a key, she began to read the quipu. It contained a detailed star map and, more importantly, a genealogical record. It didn't just track the Kukulchu, it tracked the descendants of those who fled. The records indicated that small groups of survivors journeyed north and west, mixing with nascent cultures. The name of one of these descendant lines recorded on the quipu had an astonishing phonetic and conceptual overlap with the Aztecs' self-designation, Mexica. The Kukulchu had essentially created a cultural time capsule, preserving their heritage not in stone that could be toppled, but in the memory systems and philosophical foundations that would eventually bloom into the great Mesoamerican and Andean empires. The Olmec, Maya, Zapotec, and even the Incas were, in this light, the sons of the shadow, re-emerging centuries later, having inherited the mathematical, astronomical, and ideological secrets of a civilization that had chosen to fade. On their extraction, Elias looked back at the vast green tapestry of the Amazon. The geoglyphs were once again hidden by the canopy. The shadow civilization had retreated. They didn't just vanish, Lena, Elias said, wiping the sweat from his brow. They chose to become a shadow. They sacrificed their monumental presence to ensure their cultural essence survived the catastrophe. Columbus didn't discover a virgin land. He stumbled into the fourth act of an epic drama, the latest inheritors of a knowledge stretching back to the dawn of organized society. Lena clutched the precious quipu and the star charts. The official history says the old world taught the new. This says the New World had a past so deep and wise that it consciously decided to bury itself, waiting for a less destructive age. That is the true challenge to history, Elias. The idea that a civilization could choose humility over immortality. As they boarded the small plane, soaring over the endless green, the jungle swallowed the secrets again. Elias Vance, the disgraced academic, now carried the undeniable proof not of a lost empire, but of a deliberately hidden, supremely intelligent precursor civilization. The shadow civilizations were not merely ancient, they were a profound testament to a different kind of human progress, one that valued adaptation, sustainability, and the quiet persistence of knowledge over the fleeting glory of stone and gold. The accepted timeline of the Americas was broken. The whispers had become a roar.